I'm Dr. Shannon and this is Move Her to Lose It, and today we're going to be talking about hip flexor stretches. The hip flexors are the muscles that cross the front of the hip just above the quads, and they're really important to stretch if you sit all day or you have any sort of lower back pain. It's a big part of something we call lower cross syndrome. So if you have low back pain, think of it as you're stretching the other side to help relieve pain in the part that hurts. Something I've come across in the literature that I think is really interesting and really important is that doing too large of a lunge and too extreme of an angle on your hip flexor stretch can actually cause more damage long term. So think of it as you're stretching out your joint capsule as well as your hip flexor muscle, and then over time your hip flexor starts to spasm and splint for that insecure joint capsule, so you think you're stretching your hip flexors but you're actually creating more hip flexor tension over time. There are two ways to do hip flexor stretches, either standing or kneeling, and I think both are really good, and which one I do kind of depends on the day and how my hips are feeling. The important part of both stretches is to keep your femur, so your leg bone, completely straight with your torso, so that your torso and your leg are one long line. So the hip flexor stretch standing is very much like a quad stretch. So hold on to something to keep you steady. Take your ankle in your hand and keep your femur, so your leg bone, straight up and down with your torso and your knees together. And you should feel the stretch in your quad right now, so the front of your thigh. To change this stretch to a hip flexor stretch, you pelvic tilt forward or contract your glutes. Or think of it as you are trying to bring your pelvic outlet towards the wall in front of you. So it's a posterior tilt of the pelvis, and you should feel the stretch shift from the front of the thigh right to the hip flexor in the front of the hip. The other way to do the hip flexor stretch is on the ground. So you want to make sure that your knee is underneath your hip so that your leg and your torso are in one long line. And then much like the standing stretch, you pelvic tilt forward to shift the stretch from your thigh to your hip flexor. Much like when you're stretching the pecs or the chest muscles, it's really important that you stretch the hip flexors for a really long time, so at least a minute each side. And this is because they do spend so much time in a shortened position, so we can just assume that connective tissue and fascia are involved, so you want to make sure that you're stretching that out as well as the muscle tissue. Thank you for watching my video on hip flexor stretches. I hope that it was informative. If you like this video, please subscribe for more updates on stretching and pain-free living.